Hello, my name is Gemma and I'm from the Wish and Well project. This presentation is about sensory diet. It also includes some information on sensory circuits and sensory breaks. So hopefully it will give you a little bit more information about what they mean and also if they can be beneficial for your child. So first of all, just explaining what a sensory diet means. A sensory diet refers to adjusting sensory input and how that can be made more suitable for your child and meeting their specific sensory requirements. So just to recap on the different senses, there's sense of hearing, sense of smell, sense of touch, and so that could be through obviously all different parts of the body, sense of taste, sense of vision, sight, sense of body awareness, sense of movement and balance, and there's also an unofficial eighth sense which refers to the internal system of the body. This isn't always particularly well known about or well discussed, but it is something to be aware of, and it is something to consider. Quite often children with additional needs can have difficulties with the internal system. Okay. So if you're considering who may benefit from a sensory diet, it's worth considering if a child has sensory processing difficulties. So if they do, here are a few signs that may suggest they could benefit from a sensory diet. So if when you hear some of these suggestions and you feel these may apply, then a sensory diet could be helpful for them. So if you notice perhaps they are very physically active, a sensory diet could be helpful. If they look particularly tired, or if they're lethargic throughout the day, or if they're a little bit daydreamy, or if a teacher said to you, that sometimes during the school day they're a bit daydreamy and they struggle to concentrate. Those could be indications that a sensory diet would be helpful for them. If they can get a little bit wound up and a little bit het up over things, or they can get very overexcited with physical activities, those could be indications that a sensory diet would be beneficial. If they're unable to settle after being in a very busy environment, introducing a sensory diet or a sensory break would be useful. If they are very impulsive, if they play very rough or boisterously, if they have difficulty with personal space and perhaps intrude in their peers' personal space, and that might cause little conflicts and things, a sensory diet could help. And also sleeping issues, possibly putting in sensory breaks and a sensory diet could support with this if sensory breaks were there during the day. Just when we're talking about a sensory diet isn't referring to something that is consumed. A sensory diet is referring to implementation of activities and breaks that are going to be put in during a child's day, during a child's day at home or day at school or nursery, and how that's managed and how that's organised. So if the things that I've just mentioned are sort of happening at the moment, or if when a child gets home, they are distressed when they come home, and some of these things are perhaps happening when they come home, it would suggest that during the day they're perhaps trying to hold things together, and putting in a sensory diet instead would perhaps help them manage and cope with the situation much better. So I'm going to go on to explain this a little bit further now. So what sensory breaks are and when they're needed. So a sensory break could be used to allow your child to take a break and get the sensory input their body needs to stay alert and focused. So for example, if they were in the classroom and they were trying to engage in their learning in the classroom, if they're feeling anxious or if they're feeling a little bit daydreamy, they would need to take a sensory break to help their body stay alert and to help their body be ready for learning. If they're feeling anxious, they won't be able to focus. If they're feeling daydreamy, then they won't be able to focus. So a sensory break would be necessary to help them emotionally regulate their body so that they can focus on what they're being asked to do. Similarly, if they are angry or feeling sad, they would need to take a sensory break again to bring them back to an emotional state where they are able to engage in something. The sensory breaks allow children to rest. They allow them to decompress. They allow them to get their blood flowing back into the brain so that they're able to rest and reset their bodies. So they're back in their sort of calm state, and so that they're feeling more at peace, really. If a child's still in a sort of fight or flight response, and they're feeling uncomfortable, they're not going to be in a position to be able to focus on things in the classroom, to take direction, to follow instructions. So these breaks need to be in, particularly for children with additional needs that are struggling more frequently to regulate their emotions. So this is something that needs to be put in quite often. Research around this suggests that children between the ages of 3 to 9 years old actually need sensory breaks every 15 minutes, so they do need them quite frequently. Older children, it's recommended about every 45 minutes. So they actually do need them more often than we might imagine, really. Certainly more frequently than the breaks that are planned in the school day. So breaks can be put in place by using suitable sensory products. They can be put in place by using activities to help sort of target and accommodate different sensory needs. Children can do the activities which are often involved and incorporated into play. A sensory break is normally taking a break from a seated activity or a very sort of calm and still activity and possibly doing something more active. Sometimes though, it can be that a child or a young person is doing something where they've got a little bit overexcited and perhaps needs some calming or soothing time. So it can be used the other way round as well. more often in the school environment, you may see that a child needs to do something a little bit more stimulating because actually they've perhaps been asked to sit down for an extended period. So these are just some reasons why it is beneficial that a sensory diet and sensory breaks are embedded to support a child with additional needs. Young people and children can have emotional overreactions, particularly if they're sort of suppressing how they're feeling or masking. If it's all being sort of held in, it can come out as a really big outburst. They can experience meltdowns. They can perhaps become aggressive, more so than perhaps would be usually seen, because they're trying to hold it in. They can be there can be hyper attention on certain things, and focusing on certain things excessively. There can be difficulty transitioning from activity to activity, because if there isn't the breaks to kind of to literally break up the day, then hyper focusing on certain aspects can then make it quite difficult then to move from one aspect to another, because the focus can be on one thing and then not wanting to leave that thing to move on to something else. Whereas if there's more frequent breaks, it makes things more manageable when there's smaller chunks. There can be sleep issues, there can be difficulties with impulsivity, there can be sensory seeking behaviours, sensory resisting behaviours. It can also lead to sensory sensitivity and resistance to textures, fabrics and things, foods and clothing. And it can also lead to difficulties on the social side of things with interactions with their peers, for example. So there's lots of different things that can be affected if sensory diets and sensory breaks aren't implemented really. So there's the reasons for pushing them in place. There's many positives to having them in place. Even for children that possibly, if it's a mainstream classroom, for children that perhaps, don't need them so much, it's still of benefit for those children. There aren't really negatives to having them in place. All children will benefit from them. So, it's a positive practice, really. So, commonly used sensory breaks, just to, so you've got an awareness of different ones. These can be used at home. If you can see around the house, before it's time to come and sit down for dinner or something like that, and there's an expectation that you want your child to sit for a period of time or something like that, you can consider how you might want to incorporate some of these in supporting your child. So sensory breaks can be used in a sort of school and formal setting, but they can also be used to support your child if you've got that expectation. In the supermarket, they've got to follow certain, you need them to walk with you or things like that. So you might need sensory breaks before you go into a shop or something like that. So they can be helpful in different environments. So physical activities are easy to start with. These are using large core muscles, and they are for sensory stimulation. So different examples, you could ask your child to do different animal walks. You know, ask them to walk like a bear, ask them to walk like a crab, or do frog jumps. So you just make it into a bit of a game type thing. Trampolining is the good one. So if you've got a trampoline at home in the garden, you know, it's good to make use of it for a sensory break. So you could direct your child to it at a time before you know that they need to sit and focus on something. Little trumpets are also very beneficial for indoors. Small ones in the classroom are helpful to support children. Cycling or using a scooter, that's another option, or swings. Rough and tumble play could be an example of a sensory break. Deep pressure squashing or sandwiching with pillows or balls. So this might be something that an occupational therapist might advise. So it could be using a yoga ball, for example, one of those really large, big yoga balls, and an occupational therapist would demonstrate how they would like you to do this. But this could be something that offers sort of deep pressure massage for your child. So that can be sometimes recommended. Wearing a heavy backpack for movement. So this is literally having a backpack, rucksack, and popping some books in it and things, and heavy different things. And then your child would wear it and go around the house with it on. And that would offer a sensory break because it's a calming, it's more calming for them to be wearing something that's heavy because it keeps them a little bit more grounded. So they would walk around and do something perhaps that you've asked them to do, but whilst they're wearing the backpack, it is calming for them and it would ground them and just kind of slow the pace down a little bit more for them. So that might be something that you might ask them to carry for you. If they've been a little bit excitable and rushing about and things, so that might be a break that could be a bit of a contrast to just sort of slow the pace down a little bit. Playing with weighted items such as a wheat bag or using a weighted blanket for sleep. Those are other options that could be physical. So some of these are sort of stimulating ones and some of these are more calming, soothing ones. So if you have participated in the sensory detectives course, you may have considered whether your child needs sensory breaks that are sometimes, in some cases, stimulating, or whether they need calming ones. So that's something to consider in terms of the sensory breaks that they're having, and you know when they're offered them and what sort they need. In terms of emotional regulation, sometimes stimulating ones are needed and sometimes calming ones are needed. So that's something that needs to be factored in and considered. If they're already very excitable, offering the stimulating sensory break will make them even more excitable. So a contrasting one would need to be offered in those sorts of situations. So other sensory breaks that could be offered, crawling through tunnels or going under objects, using a ball to do ball pass, so throwing it backwards and forwards with somebody, using a ball pit, and being able to play in a ball pit. So quite a simple way to do this an affordable way would be to perhaps get a small little paddling pool kind of set up. So when I had that in a classroom setting, I bought a £3 little paddling pool, and instead of filling it with water, I filled it with small plastic balls that I'd got from a local sort of home and bargain type shop. And yes, that's how I created a ball pit. But it offered quite a nice sensory break for children in the classroom as an alternative, you know, from other sensory breaks. It was one of the ones that I offered as an option. Reading in a beanbag chair could be a sensory break. Going on the bike, on their bikes. Using a fidget toy could be a sensory break. Doing some yoga moves. Using resistance bands. So resistance bands are available on the Ruby's resource bank, sensory resource bank, part of their library. They go around the bottom of chairs, and then children can use them to sort of kick their legs on to get some feedback on their legs, to keep their legs active. This is quite a good one that can be in the classroom as well. That's an indoor one for the classroom. Skipping is quite a good one. All of these are quite physical, really, these ones. There's quite a few physical options here. Going for a walk outside, or visiting the playground. Then we've got some other common sensory breaks. So we've got tactile, so playing with Play-Doh, or there's other textures, so slime, or kinetic sand. Shaving cream's another good texture, or rice. If you're exploring different tactile textures, it's good to explore wet ones, but it's also good to explore dry ones, because some children get on with wet textures, whereas some prefer dry. So if you've tried wet ones and wet don't suit your child, do try and explore dry as well. You can just play, draw, or hide objects to retrieve from tactile products. So you can sort of hide different things in the different textures and things. From a visual point of view for sensory breaks, you could try with torches to look at books, or you could try, because you have to think of different ages of children as well, and young people. So there's a possibility of sort of dot to dots, or mazes, or word searches. It's how to sort of manage it at different age ranges as well. Because if a child's sort of a little bit older, into stage 2, for example, they still need to have the opportunity to have a sensory break, but it's sort of how to manage it a little bit more subtly sometimes around peers. So there are options to be able to manage it, but to be able to manage it without it being as sort of as obvious. From an oral point of view, chew toys or chewy foods. Auditory, so for example, listening to white noise, or favourite sort of music on iPod, or there's noise reduction headphones. There's lots of different types of headphones now, and earphones and earplugs that are really quite subtle. So there's lots of different options there. From further ones for physical, there are heavy work tasks. So included within heavy work tasks would be sort of pushing tasks, pulling tasks, jumping or lifting tasks. So why might a child with sensory processing difficulties need a sensory diet? Well, there's a number of aspects why a sensory diet can be beneficial for them. It can help them in following and understanding instructions. It helps their working memory. It can help them get to sleep and stay asleep. It helps them with taking risks when they're playing. It can help them with accessing the curriculum because it helps with attention, and it can help them with focusing on things. And it can help them with their fine motor skills, with English and numeracy, and it can help them with how they interact with others and help them with their organisational skills as well. So it is quite beneficial really for them to be following a sensory diet. Here is a timetable, and this timetable was advised working alongside an occupational therapist and speech and language therapist. This was for a setting, a special school setting, with an outstanding Ofsted inspection status. And this was just for one day of the week, and the pink highlighted sections just show how frequently on one day sensory breaks were put in place. Those sensory breaks might have been to do some movement, they might have been to do some messy play, or deep pressure work, or they might have been to go outside to do some physical activity, or a sensory circuit, which I'm going to go on to explain a little bit more about. Or sometimes they were doing dough disco, which was fine motor skills work. It varied, but it is quite a clear illustration of how a group of 3 to 9-year-olds quite frequently during the day were having these activities. Before it was put in place, there were some difficulties, reoccurring difficulties with emotional regulation. Once it was put in place and the frequency with which the sensory breaks were implemented, it really did help and support the children with their emotional regulation, and they were much more supported in terms of feeling calm, being able to concentrate, and being able to focus on their activities. They knew what was coming next, they knew their routine, and about every 15 to 20 minutes they were getting a break, and the break was scheduled, and they had a short activity to focus on, and then they were having a break, and that was much better for them. When they were doing the focused work, it was far more productive, and then they were getting a break that was helping them to regulate before they then did the focused work again. Just moving on now to sensory circuits and how they can be supportive. So sensory circuits have 3 different sections, and they're based on sensory processing and sensory integration. So they've got an alerting section, an organising section, and a calming section. So they are very useful if they are also included as part of the sensory diet. So the alerting section has got an aim of sort of including some vestibular stimulation with movements within a controlled environment. So there's a demonstration about what the expectation is, and how many times certain movements are to be repeated. So activities for the alerting section could be skipping, jumping on the trumpet, using a yoga ball, star jumps, space hopper, scooter boards, or running. So it could be being on the trumpet and jumping 5 times or something like that. Obviously, it's adapted as appropriate for the children that are participating. Then there's an organising section. So this includes activities that require multi-sensory processing and balance. So it could be like a plan and do in a sequential order. So it could be putting beanbags into a bucket or something like that, and you collect the first, put it in, collect the second one, put it in, collect the third one, put it in. So it could be a little bit like some of the sorts of things that you might have seen on a sports day in an obstacle course, those kind of things. Or it could be like a ladder, a sort of canvasy type ladder, stepping in each of the gaps in the ladder, that kind of thing. So it involves some sort of coordination. Organising activities could include climbing, hopping, balancing, throwing, log roll, balance obstacle course, Simon Says sequence, a wobble board, a hand over hand pull, something like that. Those are other examples. In the calming section, calming activities support the children to complete the circuit feeling calm and focused. So activities here could include press-ups, crawling through a tunnel, or an exercise ball squash, weighted equipment, dance sack or pillowcase, or using a different fidget toy. So quite a popular one is sort of crawling through a tunnel, or using a fidget toy, or maybe stepping stones or something like that, or gently sort of rolling the ball along or something. Lots of these different activities can be adapted depending on what equipment's available or what size of space is available, so that it's very flexible. These are just some examples. So there's a couple of pictures here just showing some different activities. So as I say, depending on what space is available, depends on what may be set up. So the first picture is a young boy who is rolling the ball and following a taped pattern on the floor. So the expectation would be that he tries to keep the ball on the line on the taped pattern. In the picture on the bottom, there's a ball that maybe needs to be rolled somewhere from a certain point, from one point to another, or it could be a ball that needs to be bounced a certain number of times. There is a tunnel that maybe the children need to crawl through. There is a track. Maybe a ball needs to be rolled all the way around the track, for example. Normally, you would have a number of stations within the circuit. The circuit isn't timed. The children would just rotate around the circuit and take their time doing the activity. The activity is something to be enjoyed, not something to be done at speed or competitively or anything. It's just something to participate in and to try and enjoy doing. It isn't something that's competitive or considered to be sort of scary or anything like that. That's not the aim or purpose of participating. So yeah, that's not the main aim. It's rather focusing on the calming, the organising, and the key skills. So if you have items at home and you feel you want to experiment, you could. normally an occupational therapist would make recommendations and would advise what sort of items could be included. A hall is quite often the setting where it's set up, but as you can see in the pictures, it's not always a hall that's available for that sort of thing. So I hope you found this presentation helpful. Obviously, I've tried to include some information about different sensory breaks, and also included the reason for sensory breaks, and given you a little bit of information about sensory circuits in case your child is also accessing those within a school setting and you wondered what those were about. If you'd like any more information at all, please get in touch through Rubies, and I'd be happy to support you or discuss anything further. Okay, thank you. Bye.